Hello. On behalf of my colleagues Cathy Kozak, Jill Cargo, and Vicki Kellogg, I'd like to thank you for your interest in today's presentation entitled Preparing First-Generation Students for Content-Heavy Courses. I'm Ryan Costanzo, and I'll be offering you an overview of the work being done within the Nice College of Nursing's Altoona Nursing Program to impart research-based study reading strategies to our nursing students and pre-majors. More specifically, I'll be talking about the actions we take early on during new student orientation and continuing through a student's first semester to make sure they're equipped to handle the academic demands of courses like anatomy and physiology, nutrition, and psychology, all of which can be difficult courses for students new to college. So let's start with new student orientation and the advising sessions we have during the first fall semester. During NSO, when we're helping students to devise their schedules, we really just want to make sure to plant the seed that they don't want to underestimate the academic challenges that lie ahead, and that their first task should be to develop a time management plan so they can not only keep up with whatever lessons they're dealing with on a given day or week, but they can review material learned prior. As you know, one of the challenges facing students, one of the big challenges facing students is that the exams may be spaced out, requiring them to master a few chapters worth of material, and without a written formal or semi-formal time management system, it's easy to get behind. Now, while time management is essential, it's also important that a student new to college understand what they should be doing with their time, how they should be studying, as prior methods of study utilized in high school may be less effective when faced with heavy content courses in the post-secondary setting. That said, when we move beyond NSO and into the fall semester, my colleagues and I will use group advising sessions, or as we call them, group advising chats, which are held during the common hour, as well as individual advising appointments and the first year seminar course to demonstrate for students the study reading strategies deemed most effective by empirical research on reading comprehension. And this brings us to a discussion of the study reading strategies themselves. We have organizational strategies such as concept mapping. Think even of other note-taking systems where there's an effort to capture the main point from supporting details. So concept maps, graphic organizers, even for those of you who have used them in the past, structured systems using Roman numerals, uppercase letters, lowercase letters that distinguish between main points and supporting points so that all bits of information are not equivalent with one another, but connected to each other in very specific ways. We also have text marking strategies like highlighting and underlining, and then we move into question generation strategies. Many of you may be familiar with the SQ3R method for working through a college textbook. It's been around, I believe, since the 1940s. If you see a heading or a subheading in a textbook and you're using the SQ3R method, you know that you need to transform in your mind that heading or subheading into a question form, and that establishes your purpose for reading, in that you are reading to answer a question. And that is something I very much emphasize with students who are new to college, that the purpose for academic reading is to be able to answer questions based on that reading. And if you cannot answer that question, if you can't talk your way through the material, if you can't, and this is moving us into the rehearsal and self-teaching strategies, if you cannot explain what is in that book or on that sheet of notes or on that PowerPoint slide to another person, right? If you can't explain it, if you can't talk your way through it, then you have not mastered the material. A point I should make here is that the strategies involving question generation and rehearsal and self-teaching, those, I tell students, should be the guiding force when you study. So anytime you are reading something in a book or reading notes that have been given to you from a professor or you're reviewing a PowerPoint, you should be asking yourself, well, here's the content, but what are the questions? You know, what are the questions that could be drawn from this content? And then any kind of text marking that you do, any kind of additional notes that you make for yourself should be done with those questions in mind. And along those lines, you know, as other researchers have pointed out, if you have questions in mind, that can help to make you much more strategic in terms of what you might highlight, what you might underline, what what else you might do with your notes. But all that said, when you're meeting with students, you know, either individually or you're in a classroom setting, as we are in the first year seminar, you want to make sure that you are modeling the strategies for students. Research shows that in order for strategy instruction to be effective, strategies need to be modeled for students. And here you'll see I'm standing in front of the marker board as I would be in a first year seminar course, talking in general terms to students about how to take a given text, look at the content of the text, familiarize yourself with it, but then from there begin thinking about what are the questions that can be drawn from that text. You know, starting again, referring back to SQ3R and the notion of transforming headings and subheadings into questions, but then of course looking farther down into the passage to create additional sub-questions based on the content. And all the while thinking about what is the structure of that text? What are the main points? What is the supporting information? So that learners aren't burdening themselves with endless lists of facts that are very burdensome mentally, cognitively, but really they're taking the information and they're breaking it down. They are connecting related bits of information, and then when they're moving into a different subtopic, they are clearly marking that as distinct so that they've got not only questions for self-testing purposes, but they are creating visual aids for themselves that capture relationship between bits of information and not just long laundry lists of facts. So that's at the marker board there, me sort of generally introducing students to the notion of here's the original text and here's how you can begin transforming it. Here's how you can begin working with it, because as we know, there isn't time for endless rereading. And research on reading comprehension certainly shows us that at a given point, your understanding of a text is not going to increase with one more rereading. You've got to take that text and transform it into something that is easier for you to work with as a learner. And so we bring into play the notion of generating questions for self-teaching purposes. And questions will also help us to make more strategic decisions regarding what we want to highlight or underline or isolate in some way, and relatedly, what kind of visual aid, graphic organizer, structured notes we want to create for ourselves. And here we see a sample of text from an anatomy and physiology textbook that has been marked up, and you'll see also a visual learning aid has been created based on that reading. And it's on a marker board there because this is an example of a classroom activity that's undertaken in our first year seminar course. After the study strategies have been talked about in general terms, students are given an opportunity to engage with an authentic text in a content-heavy discipline. In this case, it's anatomy and physiology, but it could be psychology, could be nutrition, some other course that is a challenge for students new to college. And in that classroom setting, they can work individually, they can work with a partner to make decisions regarding what to do with a piece of text that they could be tested on. So as I always pose to them at the beginning of the exercise, I want them to imagine that this information is going to appear on a quiz or an exam, and they cannot afford to lose a single point unnecessarily. So what are they going to do to take that piece of text and transform it into something that is easier to learn from? What are you going to highlight or underline? What questions do you see as being drawn from that portion of text? What questions are you going to be rehearsing in the lead up to the quiz or the exam? And what questions are you going to use to sort of make yourself an expert, so to speak, so that you can engage in that highly effective self-teaching strategy whereby you are talking through the information and teaching it to that imaginary other person. If you were to make a visual learning aid, some kind of graphic organizer, concept map, how would you choose to lay that out? What would you include? What would you not include? And so within that first year seminar course, students can talk to one another, and they can also talk to the instructor, or in my case, the advisor who comes into the class to present this specific lesson, because I will share with the students what I would do in working with that material if I were in a position where I had to study it for a quiz or an exam. So I show them, they can show me what they came up with, show each other what they came up with, and then I can show them what I chose to do with it. And we can talk about points that we agree on, things that we might do differently, and the like. Now, it would certainly be an oversight if I didn't address digital reading as part of this presentation. all of the study reading strategies that I've talked about can be applied with digital text. And as a matter of fact, I explicitly make this point with students because they are dealing with print text, with print notes, print textbooks, but they are also, and increasingly so, dealing with information that is presented to them digitally. And certainly, decades ago, when there wasn't digital reading, we were talking about how difficult print textbooks can be. And indeed, they are. They're very densely written. There's a lot of terminology. It's tough going. It's tough going. Digital technology, while it certainly has its benefits and is very much a trend within higher education that is not going away, it does create challenges for readers. Research to date shows that when we read digital text, we are often reading it less carefully than print text, yet we may be overconfident. We miscalibrate our comprehension. We are more likely to miscalibrate our comprehension when we're reading digital text as opposed to print text. So the point I make to students is that if they are reading digital text, they need to be aware when they are gauging their comprehension, they're going through looking at these PowerPoint slides or reading this OpenStax textbook electronically, they need to be aware that their level of comprehension may not be where they think it is, which makes it all the more important that they're engaging with the strategies that I've shared with you during this presentation. Now, that said, if you are going to mark up a digital text, which you can, and I'll show you some examples of that in a moment here, it may not feel as intuitive. I mean, I've done it myself in demonstrating it for students. It's not something that I ever did as part of my own undergraduate or graduate or doctoral education, simply because digital reading had not yet taken off. So I do demonstrate for the students how you would create a sticky note for yourself using a digital textbook, how you would highlight or underline or draw to mark up a text. And I tell them, if that feels good to you to do it in that way, if it does feel natural, then by all means, carry forward with it. But if it doesn't, think about how you can adapt to this situation, because you don't want to become more passive as a reader just because you are reading digitally. And the research shows that that can, in fact, be what happens. So if you find it not all that easy to create questions in the margin of a digital textbook as you would with a print textbook, then consider writing those questions on flashcards or in a notebook. There's always ways that you can adapt. So just because a student is dealing with a digital text as opposed to a print text does not mean those strategies should go away. But I will say anecdotally, when I ask students what they are doing with their digital textbooks, very, very few students report using any of the marking or underlining or question generating features in those books. And that's, I think, all the more important that we as advisors and instructors demonstrate it for those students, because my fear is that the digital reading can promote some greater passivity. So you'll see here a sample of text from the OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology textbook that shows a question that I've created for myself to guide my study and some simple text marking. And again, as I say to students, if you find that to be too burdensome, right? You could always, seek out a print version, and I know that there are students who do that, and I understand. But even if you don't do that, you can still work with the digital text and perhaps record questions in a notebook or on flashcards. Create study notes for yourself in a notebook. But again, kind of going back to that general principle about when we are given dense informational text in these content-heavy courses, we've got to take what's been given to us and transform it into something that is easier to learn from. I'm going to face a quiz or an exam. What might the questions be on the quiz or exam? I want to anticipate those in advance, and that's why when I'm reading, when I'm looking at headings and subheadings, when I'm getting into the body paragraphs, or I'm looking at information on a PowerPoint slide, whatever the form of the text, I want to be asking myself, all right, here's the content. What are the questions? And then based on the questions, what kind of text marking should I be doing? Based on the questions, what kind of structured notes can I create for myself? What kind of visual learning aid can I create for myself? So that when I'm managing my studying over the course of time, which I've got to do in a lot of these tough classes, I may not see an exam for a couple of weeks, and it's going to involve a few chapters. I've got to manage my studying over the course of time. Well, if I've been strategic in the questions that I've created for myself to study from, and the text marking that I've done, and the visual learning aids that I've created for myself, I have reduced my need to go back and reread lengthy portions of difficult text. I've been able to isolate important information and then make smart decisions about what the best way is to learn that material. And here you'll just see another example of text marking with a digital textbook. We have chapter objectives here. All of the questions that you see in blue are generated by me, and I show this to students, again, just sort of hammering home the point that the purpose behind academic reading is to have answers to questions. So the more questions you can create for yourself, the more questions you can anticipate before that quiz or that exam, the better off you'll be. So again, this shows that questions can be inserted into digital text just like they could be handwritten into a print textbook in the good old-fashioned way. And there have always been students who haven't wanted to write in their print textbooks, and when I've encountered students who felt that way, I've always encouraged them, to be generating notes and creating questions in a notebook, electronically, in a Word document, on note cards, whatever works for them, as long as they are actively transforming what they are given, that source text, to something that is easier to learn from, that is setting them up to rehearse information in a productive way over the course of time. I hope that you found this presentation to be helpful. Perhaps it reinforces for you actions that you've already taken to help your own students, Or perhaps it gives you ideas for what you might do in the future when helping students who are new to college master the academic demands of content-heavy courses. In keeping with the research findings on study reading strategies for boosting comprehension of informational text, my colleagues and I would encourage you to emphasize the following when you're working with your own students, either individually, in a group advising session, or in a first-year seminar course. And that is this: whether a student is studying presentation slides or notes given by a professor, whether the student is studying a print textbook, or whether the student is reading digital text, the approach remains the same. Generate questions based on any material deemed testable. Make strategic choices regarding what to highlight or underline with those questions in mind, and then create visual learning aids that accurately capture relationships between ideas. And then, as you're studying the material over the course of time, actively talk your way through the material as you answer the questions you've posed to yourself, and cast yourself in the role of teacher who needs to explain out loud the material. Thank you. My colleagues and I are more than happy to answer any questions that you have about our work. You should feel free to reach out to me at rdc5355@psu.edu if you'd like to talk more.